Working with slabs is such a unique process for two reasons. First, every step can be so hypnotizing. And second, after being hypnotized, you're faced with the true nature of what you've become. So let's slap a couple metal legs on it and call it a day, right? Wrong. You came here to see something new. And as we build every piece of this table, you'll discover that you've been missing half of the story all along. Now, I did want to start off by saying that I truly do appreciate the river table community. In fact, a lot of what I've learned has come from channels like Four Eyes, John Malecki, and that small emerging channel that everyone's talking about. I think it's Blackmail or Slacktail Studio, something like that. Oh, he did not like that. And I've heard actually, if you say his name 3 times fast, he will literally appear before your eyes, slather you in epoxy, and turn you into one of those slabs that he keeps at his shop for the rest of your tree-forsaken life. And if you don't believe me, here's proof. Remember this donor slab that he cut up recently? Yes, the one that he cut just a corner off to use? That was Drew Witt from Wittworks. I know, it all makes sense now, huh? I guess he didn't care much about that one. At first, this letter opener is promising, but now I'm starting to realize that it is not strong enough. But I think I have an idea. I have this weird endless screwdriver for some reason, so I can sharpen it up and this thing will be nice and strong. There are a few bark inclusions that go all the way through the slab, and if I don't clean them out, I probably won't get good adhesion with the epoxy. Well, that's actually a little misleading. I would probably get great adhesion to the bark with the epoxy, but the bark itself would not have good adhesion to the wood, and that bark would eventually separate, taking the epoxy with it. I'm trying one of these nylon abrasive wheels, but immediately I'm noticing that it doesn't give me the surface that I want. But this wire wheel is doing exactly what I need. It's taking off a lot of material and leaving a very rough surface. I'll actually show you the difference. This nylon wheel creates a very smooth surface, almost glossy to the touch, which is not good. I want a lot of strong surface area for the epoxy to adhere to. This slab is actually pretty special for this project, and it's a little ironic too. Instead of being like an Oregon black walnut, this is actually a Colorado black walnut slab. And that's where this client happens to be located, is in Colorado. But the more ironic part is our top patrons from the formal garden tier just voted to plant trees in, you guessed it, Colorado. So I just think it's pretty interesting that the client commissioned us to build a custom dining table, and we're able to use sustainably sourced resources from her area. Not to mention, the same company that she hired to build her table is making an effort to replant trees in the very state that she knows and loves. But that credit doesn't just go to us, it goes to the amazing people that are part of that tier. And if you happen to want to be a part of the formal garden tier, a portion of your contribution will go to reforesting places all over this beautiful earth. And for a limited time, we're giving new members a mini version of this tabletop that's made from the exact same slab. But once they're gone, they're gone. So joining the formal garden tier now will ensure that you get one. Right now, I'm making a little bit of a mistake, I just don't know it yet. There were a few spots that just didn't look natural to me, so as you've seen, I've been trying to fill them with filler blocks. And in some woods, this would work really well and be practically invisible in the end. But in walnut, it is just way too hard to match that exact color. And after doing every single one, they all don't look good. And my only guess is probably because I don't have Drew Witt as a donor slab to match that thing perfectly. So out they come because black epoxy will look a lot better. Now, I know there's not a whole lot of footage about this out there, but believe it or not, the form is actually made out of melamine. I know, you probably would have never guessed. And after cutting my sheet in half, I'm not able to make long strips anymore, so I have to use corner blocks to connect everything together.
All right, so it's next day, and I personally feel confident enough that I could probably just caulk this whole thing and maybe use some paste wax so that the epoxy doesn't stick. But I have been forewarned by Greg with STL Woodworking that I should probably just tape the whole thing off so that I don't have to kick myself in the ass later.
When this client first contacted me, she wasn't expecting to get a slab table, and most definitely wasn't expecting to get an epoxy river table. But as I was designing her tabletop, I was just sitting there and thinking, man, this would look so good as a slab table. So I kind of got this evil little grin and decided to model one up to send her that design along with the other designs that I made. At this point, I really didn't think that she was going to take the idea at all, especially since I didn't have any pictures of doing this on my website, and I didn't think that she was the type of person that would want something like this. But sure enough, I almost got an instant email back saying, yes, I definitely want the epoxy river table. I didn't know you make those. And me being me, I said, of course we do.
So I gotta wait a few days for the epoxy to arrive, so I wish that worked in real life. All right, the epoxy is finally here. I got the form set up on sawhorses, but most importantly, everything is leveled with drywall shims, so let's do this thing.
The resin I'm starting with is SUPERCLEAR's tabletop epoxy. This stuff is super thick and it will seal the live edges as well as the sapwood where all of the bug holes are. The hopes of doing this is to avoid any air bubbles from coming up during the final pour or any horrible color bleeding from any of the pigments that I use. The only thing that I have to make absolute sure of is that I time this thing right so that I actually get adhesion with my final pour. You can see everything soaking in because that sapwood is so porous.
You know what I just realized? I forgot to wax the mold first before I did all this. So we're gonna have to take all of these out. I'm gonna have to clean off some of this epoxy that's already on the tape, wax the thing, and then get these things back in.
The seal coat is ready and it's go time, and we have no time to waste at this point. If I go too slow, I risk having the seal coat get too hard and I won't get adhesion. The second resin that I'm using is SUPERCLEAR's liquid glass deep pour epoxy, and it was suggested to me because I don't have a whole lot of experience with epoxy systems, and this stuff is pretty much idiot proof. I can pour it all in one go rather than having to do it in 1/4 inch layers. I didn't have to degas it because it's going to take so long to cure anyways, the bubbles will have time to escape. And I won't have to worry so much about overheating because it's not such a volatile system. The next day definitely comes as a big shock. I think it overheated, but weird, the thermometer says it's perfect ambient temperature, so I guess everything's fine then.
It's time to work on the table base. And I got a 12-foot board of 6/4 walnut because I want the grain and the color to remain similar throughout. Hey gosh.
So if you remember, in the intro I mentioned that you're missing half of the story, and that's where a lot of this comes into play. I've noticed over the years that a lot of creators build beautiful epoxy tables. They honestly spend a lot of time designing, experimenting, and initiating some really cool slab projects. But then a lot of those videos cut to them slapping on some metal legs, calling it good, and showing you final shots. Which is fine from a design standpoint because a lot of them look really good, and oftentimes those metal legs are made by other creators alike. But when it comes to sharing the full story with you, the viewer, you don't really get to see the legs being made very often. And I, for one, just couldn't do that to you. So with that all said, I designed a custom table base with two-toned arches that complement the black epoxy and round tabletop. The maple will be the black accents and the walnut will be the arches. And since I have everything designed already, I might as well print it out and use it as a template. And it's always funny how the easiest things are always the things that go wrong.
So I measured my template after I got it all together, and it was 3/4 too short. So I printed another one, and it's 3/4 too short again.
So instead of fooling around with the scaling of my printer to my computer, I just scaled the whole design up 3/4 of an inch and printed it as normal, which made it actually print as the right size. Which honestly, I'm glad that I even checked to begin with. Can you imagine if I was aiming for a 30-inch tall table and only came out to 29 1/4? That's substantially lower for a table. And I would surely be fired. Projects like these lately have made my job as a woodworker so much more enjoyable. I feel like I'm in the zone more often, and a good sign that I'm happier at work is if I'm humming songs to myself or playing air guitar like a 9-year-old. But there are also things that just really chap my cheeks. They pull me out of my zone. I'm using a compression bit to route my shapes because half of my cut is going to be routing uphill against the grain. And with the way a bit like this is designed, it's far less likely to catch an edge and cause a catastrophe. And half of the process in woodworking is knowing how your tools cut so that you can plan accordingly and not cut your face off, which would be quite the accomplishment if you or I managed to do that with one of these tools, especially with this little bit that I'm cutting the first half of the tenon with. Cutting the second half of the tenon is going to be a pretty cool process that I bet you haven't seen before. Probably because I just thought of it on the fly in order to cut these tenons. But I explain a lot more of this in good detail in my exclusive Patreon videos. So if that happens to be something that you want, just follow the link below. Something that has impacted my accuracy the most lately is this jig for my crosscut table. It also has this added locking block to keep the fence from having any deflection at all. And quite a few of you commented wondering if there are any plans available. So I made you some of the best plans I've ever seen, and the link is also below.
Nice.
As this tiny little patch defeats me in my career, I might as well tell you what it is and why it's there. It's kind of a long-winded answer and has a whole lot of details, so I'll sum it up in a small package for you. There was some tear out in the planer. That's it. But hear me out. I was trying to build some anticipation so that I could tell you that indeed I can patch nicely. I used a slab I had lying around for this one. The super wide dado needs to fit over the mating leg perfectly because that will contribute to a really nice half lap joint.
Since these uprights have 3/4 tenons, I can actually use this jig that I already have that makes perfect 3/4 mortises. All I have to do is customize it just a little bit.
If you're a little confused, I'll get you up to speed. First, we cut the arches out of the walnut, and then we made the X braces out of maple. Now we need to connect those two with mortise and tenons because dominoes would be too easy.
And now with the correct stop on it, the jig will sit perfectly where it needs to go.
This jig will cut exactly the same 3/4 mortise in exactly the same spot on every single leg, as long as I keep them in an X pattern while I do so. This consistency is important so that each arch sits plumb and square to the imaginary center line of the base. And if imaginary makes you chuckle, because who's gonna notice an imaginary center line? Well, our eyes are really good at seeing balance. And believe it or not, you can see the center lines of things even if they don't exist. Mainly because you're so awesome and talented, but more so because your brain is just calibrated to do so.
Didn't want that to happen.
This piece is likely getting cut off during final shaping, but I might as well glue it on now, that way if it needs to be there, it's there. But if I don't need it, then who really cares? And plus, I don't really learn my lessons, so let's do it again. So close. I thought I was actually going to make it this time, so instead I'm going to have to try something different. I'm doing the first 2 cuts, then doing what I should have done all along and just cut it off on the bandsaw. Especially since I was planning on cleaning everything up with the chisel later anyways, I probably could have saved a lot of time if I had just thought ahead, but I guess you can't win them all. When I did this exact process in this video, I learned quite a bit. Even though I've done a lot of mortise and tenons in my life, I recently learned that I really enjoy doing this part by hand. And by doing so, it allows me the opportunity to show you the story rather than tell you a story. And if stories are something that you like, then here's a good one. When I was younger, I thought I was cool. Yep, that's babyface me, alright. And in my young eyes, I thought I was going to be a rock star, famous, and amazing. But there's one stark difference between the old Corey and the new. 20-year-old me thought he was cool. But 78-year-old me, yeah, I'm 78, I just look fabulous. I know I'm not cool. For one simple reason. Being cool is like furniture or art. It's always up for speculation. Some people may love it, some people may hate it. And as soon as I stopped trying to be cool, I suddenly became myself. And I magically became cool. The insanely sharp bits that I've been using are from Bits and Bits, and I have links to them in the description below. And if you want, you can also use code FORTRESS at checkout to get 10% off if you happen to want to save money. My lockable miter gauge doesn't go to the steep angle that I need, which is just an easy fix. I can add an extra piece of wood to add that extra angle. I'm pretty sure this is a 60-degree angle to match the 60-degree chamfer bit that I used for the arches. And notice how I'm routing all the way down the leg with this tiny roundover bit. This was actually a mistake. I wasn't supposed to route all the way down because I wanted that joint to be clean in the middle. For the bottom X-brace, I'll just route it while it's assembled, but it does leave these tiny little corners that need to be finessed. I also noticed that the half-lap joints didn't seat completely 100%, so I'm just using a Cat's Moses router plane to finesse those as well. The bottom legs need cutaways for adjustable feet. I like these because not only can you adjust the height of the table if need be, you can also adjust it to an out of balance surface.
This is the top X brace that the tabletop will eventually sit on, and I accidentally drilled Forstner bit holes in these thinking that it was the bottom. And my OCD is gonna hate me if I leave those so.
If you look closely, you can see that the new cutaways actually overlap the patches that I just did, and that's the main reason I wanted to do it in the first place. Now the figure 8 fasteners have a strong location to mount to, especially because they're going to be holding the big heavy river tabletop. It's time for the glue up. I purposely left just a little bit of room in the joint so that it wouldn't squeeze out all of the glue. If you know what I mean and you've made a joint too tight, it can actually hydro lock the joint and you won't get it closed.
All right, I'm pretty excited because this thing has been curing for a week, which is way longer than it needed to cure, but it's time to demold. I thought it was going to be easier.
To flatten the slab, I'm not going to use a CNC like you typically see, or even a metal flattening jig. I'm using a simple wooden jig and this beautiful router bit. There's a video about making this jig on my Patreon if you happen to want to see it, but it is pretty simple, and this one specifically has almost zero deflection, which results in a really smooth cut. Obviously, a lot of that credit goes to how sharp that bit is, but I mean, look at that thing. It could probably cut through anything, even something I don't want it to cut.
There goes that cord.
Yep. And surely I wouldn't do that again while cutting the top, right? I mean, there's no way I could be that
So, you're never gonna believe it, but I cut another cord. For some reason, doing that last pass, the cord just gets caught underneath and goodbye.
Well, that's the fastest I've ever lost $110 in one day. So hopefully that was the end of my bad luck for this project, because we are about to do some risky business coming up. Now, cutting this circle is fairly straightforward and it's not too risky. The router is connected to a solid panel that's revolving around a center pin. Then I can simply cut the waste away and finish the process. But this is when the risky business starts.
So I need to cut a really large bevel on this bottom side of the table. And I can use that nice bevel bit that I have, but it's not gonna have nearly the capacity that I need. So I think I'm actually gonna make a jig and do it on a jointer of all places.
Oh yeah, let's just do it on a jointer, he says. You mean that giant spinning death trap that's one of the most dangerous tools in the shop? Or it's one of the most genius things I've ever thought of, and could be used to put an infinitely large bevel on any type of circle that you would want. Now all I have to do is keep drilling holes lower and lower to move the pin so that the bevel cuts deeper and deeper over time. And to be completely 100% honest with you, I did not know how this was going to work out. I thought it could go crazy wrong or something would go flying for all I know, but it works perfectly. It almost doesn't even need to be sanded. But I also thought of an idea for someone that doesn't have a joiner. You could also use an electric hand plane and hook it to the same jig that the router was on to cut the circle, but instead you're cutting a bevel continuously with an electric hand plane instead. Now that's most certainly up to your discretion and responsibility, but the idea is there if you want to use it. There seems to be a lot of talk out there whether C-channel actually keeps a slab flat or not. And as mind-boggling as this topic is, it's really not up for debate. It's just physics, kind of like these bow ties. In Woodcraft by Saman's latest video, during his process he actually convinced me to use bow ties in this project because cracks in slabs can open up and bow ties have a mechanical advantage against that. And this brings me back to the C-channel topic. Slabs warp, they twist, they do all sorts of cupping and who knows what else. That's why we have to flatten them in the first place. And when you add essentially a beam to that, it's bound to hold it more flat over time. That's just simple structural mechanics. And if you don't believe me, I actually don't blame you because I am just another YouTuber. I'm sealing some areas with lacquer first before I start spot filling, and this is fine as long as I add some tooth to the spots that I'm actually filling. This trick comes from my experience of making acoustic guitars. The spruce on these instruments is so light and porous that it stains basically by anything. So I used shellac to seal any surrounding areas before I did weird inlays, glue-ups, or coloring processes. And this is a similar process. The black pigment in this CA glue can stain the pores of the walnut. And if I had shellac, I would be using that, but I have a can of lacquer and that will at least seal the outside pores so I don't get any staining. The benefit of using shellac, if you have it, is that it bonds to just about anything and most things bond to it, as long as you're using de-waxed shellac. So this might look like I'm using a dark hard wax oil, but make sure your butt is firmly planted in your seat for this one because it's a stain. But hear me out, I know what I'm doing and you just have to trust me on this. I'm sure you love the natural color of walnut, like a lot of people do. And it looks undoubtedly amazing when the project is fresh, but that literally fades within a year or two because UV light turns walnut into piss yellow. So a special technique that I'm doing here is I'm using mineral spirits to wipe off some of that stain and bring back some of the beautiful colors of the walnut. And you can see with a little bit of elbow grease, I got those colors back. And now the surface of the wood will be protected from UV by the dark pigment in the stain. If you actually look at a lot of designers' websites, you'll see that their furniture is usually dark stained walnut because they know it fades and they stain it instead. There's actually a couple of reasons why I wanted to color it though. First of all, we're building cabinets that will be matching this table in the same room. And secondly, I wanted to absolutely make sure that the legs match the walnut top. Because now we can pull off that blue tape, sand perfect lines into the black edging, and then stain it with the exact same process we did before. Now that's nice. Before I go finishing this thing, I need to wipe it down with denatured alcohol to get rid of any oils on the surface, as well as scuff sand any black sections on the legs. I have to spray everything in a top coat, otherwise the stain would just wear away over time. And I'm really trying to mimic a hard wax oil finish in the end, so I'm spraying extremely lightly so that the grain can still show through. But since the first two coats are so thin, I have to be extremely quick when I sand. Otherwise, I will certainly burn through that finish and the satin top coat will show every single imperfection. As we near the end of this project, I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank you for watching this video all of the way through. There are many ways to support this channel, as I've already talked about, but the best way is just watching my videos from start to finish. And if there's one single takeaway that I want you to get from this video, it's that you make this all possible.
So pretty. That's gorgeous.